Northumberland mountaineer Richard Patterson knows what it's like to feel on top of the world, literally. Not content with scaling 7 of the highest peaks on Earth, he's now conquered Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain. And to commemorate his amazing achievements, he's planted the flag of Northumberland on the summit of every one of them. Richard, you've climbed the 7 highest mountains on each of the continents, but the biggest and the best is Mount Everest. Why did you decide to tackle Everest?
Oh, well, Everest, I guess it's the ultimate. It is the world's mountain. It's the highest mountain on the world, and I suppose when you're growing up, everybody, at school knows the name Everest 'cause it's the highest mountain. So everybody would wonder what it's like to be up there, and that's where my inspiration for climbing came from, really. I trekked to base camp in my early 20s. And was just inspired by all of the people there actually trying to go up and climb the mountain. And we only trekked up to base camp, but I didn't want to stop there and come back. I wanted to keep going and join these climbers. So I was inspired by that, and that pretty much started my my love of climbing. And then from there, I started, I suppose, my apprenticeship of trying to gain the right skills and experience so that one day I would actually be able to go back and attempt it myself, which took 10 years.
Now, that apprenticeship you mentioned, just mention some of the other mountains briefly that you have climbed before Everest.
Yeah, so I've climbed the highest mountain on every continent, so that's Denali or Mount McKinley in Alaska, Aconcagua, which is in South America, Kilimanjaro in Africa. There's Mount Elbrus, which is in Russia, which is considered the highest in Europe. I would probably say Mont Blanc was the highest in Europe, but I've climbed both. Then there's Kosciuszko down in Australia, which is a bit of a rounded hill, which is quite an easy one just to walk up. And then there's Mount Vinson, which is in Antarctica.
So you had some experience, quite a bit of experience before Everest, but nevertheless, it's very daunting. We're talking about 2 months of your life here. So tell me about the climb itself.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's 2 months away from home, so it takes a lot of motivation just to stay focused and to keep wanting to climb every day. So basically you set up a base camp at the foot of the mountain, and then that's going to be your home for 2 months. And then from then on, you sort of have different forays onto the mountain, trying to get progressively higher each time. And the reason that you do that is because of the altitude. So there's not much oxygen. So the higher you go into space, there's less oxygen. On the summit of Everest, there's about 29% of oxygen as there is down here at sea level. So if you went straight from here to there, you'd have to breathe 3 times as fast, and your heart would have to go 3 times as fast. So it just wouldn't be physically possible. So the reason that you go up progressively higher each time is to let your body adjust to the lack of oxygen. So your body produces more red blood cells, so your body can carry more oxygen effectively, which is why athletes train at altitude. And then also, by going a bit higher, your body actually changes how it deals with oxygen. So it makes it a bit more, the body becomes more efficient with oxygen. So you make different forays up onto the mountain, and eventually you get to a point where we had 4 camps. You get to camp 3, and that's kind of your acclimatization period over. So then you're ready to go for the summit, and then you just then waiting basically for a weather window where you can actually go up and get to the top.
It's 10:30 in the morning, and the same Serac has just fallen off the west shoulder of Everest as it did the other day, and we're probably going to get covered again by snow. So nobody, whenever it was 3 or 4 days ago, nobody died, nobody got injured, but we'll see what happens today.
Now that last 900 metres to the summit took you 19 hours. Is that because of the lack of oxygen?
Well, yes, it is, basically. So we were ready to go at the start of May. I mean, basically, every year you can only really climb Everest in May because the jet stream wind that commercial airliners cruising, that wind's hitting the top of Everest. So it's 150-mile-an-hour winds on Everest. But every May, basically, the jet stream goes on holiday north for a bit. So that then opens up an opportunity for climbers to get to the top. So we were all sort of funneled into just 4 days, basically this year, that people actually climbed Everest. So we were funneled into this little window. So then we go up. We've had the weather forecast. You get to your high camp at Camp 4, and then sort of rest for a bit, and then we actually set out at 9 o'clock the night before, and then climb all the way through the night, because you know it's going to take a long time because of the lack of oxygen. And we were even using artificial oxygen, so we had oxygen bottles in our backpacks, so we're sort of breathing a bit like a spaceman would, or a fighter pilot, big oxygen mask on, which makes things a little bit easier. But even with the artificial oxygen, we were still having to take 10 full breaths per step. So it's just, you can't imagine down at sea level what that's like, but up there, I mean, the first 5 breaths you take, it makes no difference to your body. You still it's like after you've run 100 meters, you're just completely out of breath. Your body is aching. It's just starved of oxygen. The first 5 breaths you take, nothing happens. You're still in that sort of feeling of just craving oxygen. And eventually, through the next 5 breaths, you feel a bit better, and then you're able to make one more step forward.
The irony of all of this is, of course, that by the time you reached the summit, you're 1.5 stones lighter. So you started off fit at the bottom, but were probably really unfit because of dehydration and lost weight by the time you got to the top.
Yeah. Over the course, I lost, as you said, 1.5 stones. So you need to be super fit before you go to Everest, because you're going to lose so much muscle and so much weight over the 2 months that's the irony. When you actually need to be at your strongest, you're actually at your weakest. But yeah, so the higher you go, it certainly is harder with the oxygen. And then the last 100 meters or so to the top are even harder. But because you've been going for however many hours on that day already.
Just to put it into context, I mean, this is not a walk in the park, because there were people there when you were there who suffered from frostbite, who would require finger amputation. That's how risky it is.
Oh, there's a lot of dangers on Everest. The oxygen, the lack of oxygen is certainly one, where the human body isn't meant to live at that sort of altitude. And then there's the cold as well. So it was -40 centigrade on our summit day. So you've got to be very careful with your extremities, with your feet and your hands, to make sure that they stay warm enough. So I mean, you're wearing big clumpy boots, which are really not very. You don't have much finesse in the big clumpy boots, and then you're wearing big mitts as well. So, but you still have to concentrate all the time on making sure you've got blood circulating. You might have to sort of shake your hand down to try and get blood down to there. But it's quite surreal, because you read about that in books and you see it in documentaries, people having problems at altitude, and it was surreal to be there when I felt fine myself, but then people around you are sort of spaced out because of the lack of oxygen, and people having frostbite.
But you took your mask off at the very summit to have your picture taken, didn't you?
Yes.
For how long?
I took my oxygen mask off basically for 2 minutes, because I wanted to have a picture with that you could tell it was me and not some spaceman with a big mask on top of Everest. So I took it off for 2 minutes, and I pretty much felt like I was suffocating after that. So after the pic were taken with pictures, I sort of rushed back to my bag and put my mask straight back on, and cranked up the flow of oxygen to get a bit more.
Now, it wasn't just a picture of you, because on every climb you've done, on each of these mountains and on Everest, you've taken the flag of Northumberland and planted it there and taken a photograph. Is it because you're a Northumberland lad that makes you want to do this? You're proud of your county? Oh
yeah, well, definitely proud of where I come from. This is where I was born and grew up. My family have had roots here in Northumberland for 400 years or so. We've tracked the family history back, and still all within the sort of the ancient kingdom of Northumbria. So yeah, it's my home, it's my heritage. So I'm very proud to come from Northumberland.
Biggest forest mountain in the world. Run to the yellow band.